thank you so much for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. I mean, I'm delighted to be spending the evening with you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Ritu, I'm very curious to understand about your life. How did you get into coaching? But before that, I've got a very basic question for you. Tell me a memory of yours where you thought that you might want to explore your hands either into leadership development or into management roles. I remember when, as a child, somebody asked me, what would you like to do? And without even realizing, I said, I would like to be a manager one day. And I remember I was in 6th, 7th standard.
It's interesting you say that, because my answer, and I've been asked, like all kids, I've been asked this: what do you want to be when you grow up? My childhood memories, and this would be when I was probably 8 or 9. I remember I come from a very small town in India, and we had this huge house, but in front of that there was a big field, and a lot of kids from the neighborhood would come and play there. And one of the things I enjoyed doing even back then, and I have such vivid memories of that, is really kind of, get the group together, decide what we're going to play this evening. And then if there was a fight between two people, I would go there and intervene, like separate them out. So in fact, in my family, people used to say, oh, she's a born leader. I mean, I didn't understand what that meant, but I guess I had a little bit of working with people right from my childhood days, like very early days. So that's a memory I have of, I didn't know the word leader, but I wanted to do something with people, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. Now, tell me about a time when you realized the importance of coaching in your career.
There have been multiple times, and early on in my career, I didn't really understand the difference between mentoring and coaching, and I'm talking, I started working way back in 1996, like, gosh, I'm dating myself, but at that time, there wasn't too much awareness of what coaching is. So what I always looked up to is the leaders I worked with, who in some way were mentoring me, but that became my go-to tool for any time that I was stuck. But one is, as I grew up in my career, I realized this was back in 2010. I was transitioning from one role to the other, and which were very different. I had always led big teams. I was an operations leader. So I was used to that kind of work. And then my new role required me to become an individual contributor, which meant I didn't have a big team. There was a lot of things I had to sit and do, which was very alien to me. I had till that time, I had always led teams. And that's the time, I guess my boss also realized I needed some help, and I worked with a coach. And what a transition from there it was, from struggling to really excelling in that role, and to gaining such insights about my strengths, about my blind spots. It was an amazing journey I had with my coach that time. Yeah, so 2010, I really tasted the blood, and that stayed with me. And who knew, 5 years down the line after that, I'm going to become a coach myself. I didn't know that time.
And one of the most celebrated coaches in
I would take that as a compliment, Gaurav.
And the kind of work that you do is really interesting, because you're one of those very few people who have actually learned the art of bringing consulting and coaching together and serving the global leaders. And to further add to that, you have written a book called Leaders Block: How Great Leaders Recover After They Stumble. Now, when I was thinking about the term leaders block, the word that came to my mind was the writer's block. And according to Wikipedia, writer's block is a condition primarily associated with writing, in which an author loses the ability to produce new work or experiences a creative slowdown. Now, this condition ranges in difficulty from coming up with the original ideas to being unable to produce a work for years. Now, if I look at it from that perspective, why did you choose this theme called leader's block? And what do you mean by leader's block?
Okay, and great question. And I'm going to give a little longish answer to that, so bear with me.
Please go ahead.
So let me start by what is leader's block, or how did this come about? But just let me explain leader's block, the meaning. Just as you said, you explained what Wikipedia said about writer's block.
Yeah.
Almost exactly the same for leader's block. So let me say this. So leader's block is a phase where a leader experiences a slowdown in his career or a slowdown in his creativity. Mm-hmm. It's a phase when he or she is demotivated, uninspired, or feels directionless. So it is a phase when the leader is not performing on top of their game.
Yeah.
So, and the reason I associated with writer's block, because one, it's very easy to remember. So people think writer's block and leader's block, and and they get it. The other thing is, like writer's block, this is temporary. It's not like you stuck in it forever, right? It's temporary. Okay. The other thing that I selected leader's block and compared it to writer's block, just as the writers who go through writer's block. I mean, if you think of any celebrated writer, they've all gone through writer's block. They've all had a phase, when they weren't coming up with the best of their work, and they came out of it. I was listening to an interview by J.K. Rowling, and she said after her first book, she was in a writer's block for a long time because the expectations were so high after the first book that she really went into a writer's block, to come up with a second book. Similarly, these leaders are already on top of their game, in the sense that they're already doing well. And then something triggers or something happens which gets into the block. So that's really the comparison between writer's block and leader's block. So, so that's the second part of your questions, like what is leader's block? Now, the interesting story about how I came, how I got to this term or why I selected this term. Gaurav, as you said in the beginning, I've had the opportunity to work globally and also to coach leaders globally. And as I listened to them and as I worked with them, I realized there are so many books, articles, talks that are constantly telling them how to be better, how to be more effective, how to be more productive, how to be more profitable. But there were very few people or maybe articles or books that were really talking about the challenges that leaders go through in their leadership journey, because leadership is not it's not a child's play. There are challenges on their way, and nobody was talking about it. And that's when I decided, what can I do to bring about these challenges, these dilemmas, these temporary blocks in their journey? How can I talk more about it? How can I get them to talk more openly about it? And that's why I decided that's the topic I want to focus on. So, and the other thing I do want to say that, I don't want to take the credit for the term leader's block only, totally by myself, because my mentor, Frederick Harron, he really helped me to come up with this term. So I always give him credit for that. He was the one who kind of helped me come up with the term. So that's a long answer.
So you've not yet done a value addition to the leadership teachings in the world. You also added value to the Oxford Dictionary as well, I guess.
That's really my big hope. At some stage, this should become, if not Oxford Dictionary, but this should become a term, a very common corporate lingo. People just say, oh yeah, I think this one is going through leader's block. Oh, I just went through a leader's block. That's really my hope for the future.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's a phase and it's temporary. Tell me more about this.
Yes. So the reason I called it leader's block, and like I said, I compared it to writer's block, is because it's a phase that leaders go through, and with few actions that they take, they can overcome it. And in most of the cases, they do overcome it. So it is not the end of the road, or it's not the dead end for them. It is, it's a little bit like a blip. So they're performing, something happens, they go through a leader's block, they overcome it, and then they're back on the track. And that's why I say it's temporary.
So tell me more about what are the various early signs of a leader's block?
Yeah, and that's very interesting because, for the book, I have interviewed over 200 leaders across the globe, different industries, different gender, different, the levels in the organization. So it's kind of tried to get everybody's voice there. And there were very interesting, examples that people shared with me when I asked them what are some of the symptoms that they experienced when they were going through leader's block. But I will pick up few those ones that came very often. So one of them was this feeling of disengagement. And let me tell a little bit more. So this was when leaders felt, who were going through leaders block, felt that they were not putting their hands up for any new initiative. They were not volunteering for any new project. They were not pushing the envelope. They were not being more creative. The whole narrative around them started to become cynical and skeptical. Things like, oh, it's always done like this. Oh, I've been there, done there. Nothing is going to change. And the other thing is also themselves. They started to feel or to notice a change in their own moods. More irritable, more volatile. In one meeting they'll be very quiet, in one meeting they'll be very vocal. So there was mixture of all these, but disengagement and the cynicism, those were two very common traits that almost every leader experienced when they were going through leaders block. So those are early warning signs, really.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Now, a question is coming to me and it goes like this. Now, when you're talking about leader, is there any age bracket to that as well? Because I come across a lot of people in the age bracket of, let's say, 30 or 45. Now, they say that we are not at all happy. We are not being able to engage ourselves. And I don't think that we are doing something meaningful. So that's one category of people. Now, there's another category of people, and they say that we are going through midlife crisis. So how would you look at these two different scenarios?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. So for me, anybody who's in a position to inspire, influence, or impact even a single person, either through their action, through their words, or through their thoughts, right? Either of them, that person is a leader.
So influence, inspire, and impact.
That's correct. Those are three things. If you're doing that, and therefore think of it, a sports person, even a tennis player is a leader, because when he or she is on the court, you're inspiring so many fans, influencing so many youngsters who are learning the game. A parent is a leader because, through your action, through your thoughts, you are influencing, impacting, and inspiring your child in the house. So a parent is a leader. Think of even the YouTubers these days, the young people, very young people who are putting their content out. And what they're doing when they put their content, they get followers, and those followers are either getting inspired or impacted or, or influenced by the content they're putting out. In fact, sometimes when I talk to young people, I say that you're saying you're not a leader because you're not leading a team, but every content that you put out on social media, that's making you a leader. Because you're doing either of the eyes for your audience. So it's very important for people to know that you don't need to lead a team to be a leader.
Yeah.
And especially in today's connected world.
So my question is, does anyone who is in the space of either influencing, inspiring, or impacting others,
yes,
every individual goes through this stuff?
Answer is yes. And I say this with a lot of conviction. Because every leader that I have spoken to them has said yes. And it's my own belief that you cannot have a journey without having blips. Let me give you an example. So if you think of a journey through, let's say, through any medium, let's say through the road, or through air, or through water, you're going to get bumps, right? On the road, you're going to get speed breakers or some bumps, some potholes. In the air, you get the turbulation, you get those pockets. In sea, you get a little bit of the tides. So no journey is smooth, and leadership is no different. In fact, even if you look at politics, or if you look at artists, or if you look at sports people, no one person has performed consistently. There have been little blips. And leadership, again,
such a beautiful metaphor. Such a beautiful metaphor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's easy to remember.
Yeah. In fact, this reminds me, I was working with one of the senior leader in an organization. And while working there, one of the challenges that she had was that even if she's feeling a little down, when she does not feel that she has got 100% control on what she's doing, she would find it extremely tough to ask for help. And in fact, while I was going through one such article that you have written in the Forbes magazine, you mentioned that leaders resist asking for help.
Yeah.
It's self-inflicted. And now connecting it back to what you've written and the experience I was sharing, what's your take on that? What do you mean by it's self-inflicted?
Yeah. Let me start by saying this. Actually, people really, and when I say people, it includes you and me too. We really look at our leaders like superheroes. Whether it's the CEO or anybody senior to us, in our mind, somehow we think that person cannot falter or can do no wrong. We almost treat them like superheroes. But fortunately or unfortunately, leaders are humans. And as long as they're humans, they will fail, they will fumble, and they'll falter.
Yeah.
We need to remember that, right? Now, what happens to the leader? So in this case, the leader that you're talking about, let's just use her as an example. Now, what's happened is that one, there is this whole peer pressure of your colleagues, of your teams, your family, your friends, in a visible and non-visible way. There's always pressure on you to perform, because you are at that stage, and people are looking up to you, and people are expecting you to perform in a certain way. So therefore, one, as a person, you don't want to fail them. That's one part of it. But the reason I say it's self-inflicted, it's because of this. Now, leadership is a coveted position. You've got there through hard work. You've got there through a lot of, overcoming a lot of competition, because, a lot of people start and only few keep, the pyramid keeps getting steeper as you go up. So you've obviously kind of, faced a lot of competition. You worked hard and you've got to a certain level. Now, when you get to a level, you don't want to lose that position, or you don't want to look like that you're the person who's not right for that position.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with a couple of things here. You're dealing, one, with your own mindset that, I should know it all. That's the belief. And that's, again, a limiting belief, saying, oh, I've got to know it all. It doesn't work like that.
It's the internal
word. Exactly. It's the internal voice, or it's the internal turmoil. And the third is really what happens with a lot of leaders, that they start to use their position as their identity. And that really becomes their identity. And therefore, the fear of losing that identity, or of that identity getting tarnished in any way, is so high and just inside the mind, that you don't want to ask for help, or you don't want to show that you don't know it. I think the most difficult words that a leader finds to say is, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I call it self-inflicted.
So this is like attachment to your own identity that you have created in your mind.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
So help me understand, Ritu. You have done a lot of research, and as you mentioned that you have interviewed over 200 people to come up with leader's block. Now, what do you think are 3 or 4 most important traits of a leader, when not adhered to, can lead to these blocks?
So firstly, I'll say, even if a leader is adhering to all of this, you may still go through a leader's block, okay? So that's my basic premise. But the key is, if you have some of the traits, and I'm going to talk about them, you are in a position to recognize leader's block way earlier, or much earlier. And therefore, you can get through it much faster. So one of the most important thing in my mind is self-awareness, and it's called by different names. Some people call it self-leadership, self-management, but building self-awareness is so important for leaders, because what that does is, then you know your triggers, you know your blind spot, you are aware of the changes that you see within you and around you. And therefore you're able to catch it much early on. So self-awareness is a trait that really enables leaders to get through leader's block very fast and to recognize it much early on. The other one is humility, and along with it is courage. And the reason I say humility and courage, because you need to have humility to acknowledge that you could need help, and you need courage to ask for that help. So humility is acknowledging it to yourself, and courage is about asking for help. And if you have these 2 things, then again, because you've identified something earlier, you ask for help earlier, and therefore you get through it earlier. Yeah. So those are 3 traits I would say are very important, and they really enable a leader.
This reminds me, I was having a conversation with Gururaj Deshpande. He's one of the most celebrated businessmen in India. He runs several organizations, somebody that I've got high regards for, and one of the most humble individuals that I've come across. And when I think of that, okay, here are leaders, few of the leaders that I look up to, then people like Ratan Tata, Azim Premji, and Gururaj Deshpande are few of the names that come to me very often. And I asked him a very simple question, Mr. Deshpande, what do you think is one of the most important lessons that you have learned that has served you till today? And he said, be humble.
Yeah.
And as you are talking about self-awareness, humility, and courage, so I can actually go back to my conversation with him and say, probably what he was coming from. And I think he's an epitome of humility. He's like a multi-billionaire. He's on the first name basis with people like Bill Gates, Ratan Tata, Oprahs and the Deepak Chopras of the world. And he's so humble that every time I speak to him, I feel so humble.
That's right. I mean, and well said. Humility or being humble is one of the, I think it's one of the most important and the underlying thing of leadership, or of any, forget leadership, any good person, a good human being,
As a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I often share with people, the journey of a leader is the journey of a human being.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So Ritu, what do you think is the impact of these blocks on business performance or building a culture of high performance?
Yeah. So, and I talk about in my book, Leaders Block too. So the impact of Leaders Block is really at 3 levels. One, let's start with the impact of Leaders Block on the leader himself or herself. Mm-hmm. Because, when you're going through Leaders Block, it's not easy on you too, because, your confidence takes a hit. Because you're not performing on top of your game, you're getting stuck, your own self-esteem, your own ability to get through that's frustrating. And also it impacts you personally, because because of your moods, because of the because of the volatility, because of your irritable, it kind of very easily creeps into your personal life. You carry those moods back to your family. So it has a very deep impact on the leader themselves. The second level of impact is on their teams. Now, and sorry, just to go back on the first point, when the impact of Leaders Block on the leader himself or herself is also because they're not performing on top of their game, there is high probability that your decision making will be impacted. You're probably going to micromanage, so that's going to impact your team. You're probably going to take decisions in a haste now, which could have a big impact on the business. So that's one. The second impact is on the teams. Now, we know there are various surveys and studies. There's Hay Group study, there's Gallup studies, which says that, the mood or the engagement level of the team directly depends on the immediate manager. And as a leader, if you are not engaged enough, if you are disengaged, if you are demotivated, imagine the impact it's going to have on your teams. There's a direct impact. I think it's a Hay Group. They've done a survey where they said, the teams who work in very good environment or very energized environment perform 30% more than rest of the teams. And the part that a leader plays in creating that environment is huge. In fact, the environment is created by the leader himself or herself. So therefore, there is a direct impact on team and the team's culture and on the team's performance. Imagine a demotivated leader trying to motivate a team, or a lost leader trying to direct a team. Yeah. And then the third impact is on the organization. Now, there is tangible and non-tangible impact. The tangible is in the form of unproductivity. Imagine your leader, who's going through Leaders Block. These are leaders who are leading teams or who are certain position in the organization. If they are not performing on top of their game, that means they're losing productivity. And if you do simple maths, back of the envelope calculation, take their salary, let's say even if they're in a block for 2 to 3 months, which is the average time, 3 to 6 months is the average time a person stays in a block, take out that, 1/3 of their salary from a year, do the maths. It's substantial amount of money, so that's unproductivity. Second is attrition, which is again very quantifiable. Not only the leaders sometimes leave the organization, but their team members can leave organizations because of a bad leader or the leader going through that bad patch. And then there are the intangibles like the culture, the employee engagement, and things like that, which you can't put a dollar amount to. But the impact is huge. On everybody around them.
Yeah. So what, according to you, when a leader is going through this phase for 3 to 4 months, it would have a direct impact, of course, on his productivity, right?
Right.
And as you mentioned, that an uninspired leader is leading another uninspired team. What kind of results do you expect, of course? And when the team is working together, of course, we can understand the kind of impact it will have in an organization. So what do you think is the single biggest reason for unproductivity in an organization?
So, a lot of people can debate a lot of things. I guess if I were to put it in in very simplistic terms, I would think the single most reason for unproductivity is disengagement of your employees.
Yeah.
You know, to me, you can come at it in different ways, different things, but it just boils down to a disengaged employee and employees that cause unproductivity.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with humans at the end of the day.
Yeah. And in fact, Ritu, on several occasions you have mentioned, and also you have written that in your book, that it's important to understand human side of the leaders.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
So, like I said earlier, that, we somehow expect our leaders to be superheroes. But unfortunately, they're not. Because, if you start to look at the other person, whether it's your manager, whether it's some other leaders or anybody, as humans, as people who are capable of making faults, who are capable of fumbling, faltering, suddenly your view for them or your impression of them or, your thoughts for them change. Because then you start looking at them saying, yeah, actually, they're just like us. Probably they've got to, they've got this way in their career because they were probably more senior. They probably, they had a different career path or whatever. But then you have a different level, a lens of looking at them. And the other thing is also because if you start to look at leaders as humans, then you can treat them and treat yourself with more compassion, with more empathy. If you're going to think they're demigods, then then that part is missing. And actually, a lot of time, leaders go through that. Their teams almost treat them like demigods. I know it's an extreme thing, but I have seen it where people think, oh, like the CEO is going to save their life or something like that. In reality, the CEO is also making decisions based on the information that's provided to him or her. So that's why I think for me it was very important to look at leadership with a human lens, to say that there will be challenges, there will be obstacle, and let's talk about it. And therefore, let's not try and solve everything yourself. Reach out for help. So that's really the genesis of that term, humanizing leadership.
And I love the term when you're saying that he's not a Superman or she's not a Wonder Woman.
Right.
As much as they are delivering results, as much as they are leading organizations or big teams, they have their own deep challenges that they're dealing with on day-to-day.
That's correct.
So Ritu, you do a lot of work with global leaders. You have worked with leaders from the US, from Canada, from several parts of Europe. You have done a lot of work in several parts of Asia. I'm just wondering, what are the basic challenges a leader goes through in transitioning from one role to another? And when I'm saying one role to another, the role could be moving from one country to another. The role could be moving from director to a CEO of an organization. The transition could be from one organization to another.
So the transition part, let's talk about one role to the other or one organization to the other or one level to the other. You're right. What I do as part of my coaching, I have something called transition coaching. So which is basically I work with leaders to draw out their first 90-day plan. Like what are the first 90 days are the days when they're going to make an impact and they're going to make an impression on their stakeholders that they're going to be working with. And that's also their learning period. Because what I have seen, Gaurav, is a lot of time when people move into new roles, they just jump into it and start to learn and do things. Yeah. They don't take enough time to step back and to start to, kind of understand the whole landscape, understand the whole ecosystem, give themselves time to understand, sit with their teams, understand the process. They just come in and actually there's expectations from them and they themselves just jump into it and just want to, take on that role, start to deliver, and which a lot of time backfires because you haven't taken enough time to do that. Now, as an example, there's a leader I just finished coaching, 2 months back. He was the strategy head of this big company, and he moved from being a strategy head to being a site leader. Strategy head, he was heading a group of 10 people, highly specialized 10 people. And then when he became a site leader, he was responsible for 2,000 people. And he had never in his life managed so many people. This a totally different shift. He was very analytical, very structured, knew his stuff, get into things, read so many reports, and that's how he would deliver. Now that he was responsible for 2,000 people, he couldn't do that. He wasn't even expected to do that. And actually, he tried to do it and it failed. His first employee engagement survey showed that, because he was just using the same skill set that he was using as a strategy head to be a leader. And of course, when we work together, that's what we worked on, saying, what are the different skill set? What are the different ways of doing things? And also, what's the mindset now, right? The mindset is that you can't do every single report that's going out. You can't look at every single number. Delegating more, relying on people more. And that, like I said, as much as it's a skill, it's also a mindset shift. It's a shift in the way you think and you look at things. So that's a very recent example of transitioning from one role to the other.
Yeah. So primarily around one is, as you mentioned, the challenge of the mindset, because the way I've been operating in this sphere, there's a different mindset that is required to operate in another role, right? So that's one of the primary. And then, of course, you spoke about the strategy that actually helped you. So all the winning formulas that you had yesterday, they're not going to help me today.
That's correct.
Skill set also you mentioned.
Absolutely. And the second part of your question around the cultural thing, because I'm based in Singapore, and Singapore is the regional headquarters for so many companies. There are a lot of expats who are here, who come from the headquarters, so what happens is, and what I have seen in my coaching, because I do end up coaching a lot of expats here, this is two layers. One, at a human level, if you ask me, everything is same, because, people still have the same emotions, same feelings, and therefore compassion and empathy is important, and that plays a big role. But there are also underlying nuances then, things like, let's say, even a value. Now, the way that value is depicted and appreciated is different. So, for example, if some leaders come from the US and is working in Singapore, is working with a Singaporean team, let's say respect is of course a value for most of the humans. But the way respect is depicted in the US is very different from the way respect is depicted in Asia. In Asia, respect would mean certain level of hierarchy. There's certain way you behave. There's certain way you address people. US, it's very different. So the word is still the same, but the way it's interpreted is quite different. And that's the cultural nuance. Similarly, communication style. While a country, if you've ever worked with a German, very direct, right? Try and do that direct conversation with a Singaporean. It'll not work. Singaporeans are not at all direct, and therefore then kind of molding and changing your communication style to suit the teams. Communication is not about what you say, but it's how it's received by the receiver, right? So the quality of the communication is not the words you are using, but what the receiver's understanding of those words. And that's, again, it has a cultural nuance to it in the way you communicate, from one country versus the other. So those are, on the top of my mind, those two that are coming to things, the values, the communication, and of course, ways of working, and then there are multiple layers to that.
And being aware of the cultural differences as well.
Yes, exactly. Very true. Even as a speaker, even as a global speaker, when I speak in different countries, I do my homework of understanding some stories related to that country, understanding some cultural nuances. Now, I may not be able to learn all of it, but enough to be able to give a speech that people can relate to, and then have a conversation after the speech over drinks and dinner, so that I show that appreciation for their culture, for those nuances. So absolutely, very important.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. And Ritu, here's my last question to you. I've heard you saying that this book is a very practical book. And I remember during one of our conversations a couple of months back, you mentioned this is a book by the leaders for the leaders. So if you can just share with us a couple of practical tips that could help a leader. And when I'm using the word leader, irrespective of the designation he or she has, right? That could help that leader to deal with these blocks on day-to-day basis.
I would want to say this to our audience. If there's one thing from our conversation that you can take away, is it nothing else? If you forget everything else, if there's one thing, it's this word block. So BLOCK. If you can just remember this word block. Now, let me tell you why. The B is for big picture. Every time you're stuck, step back, get a bigger perspective, look at things long term, how this problem or this block is impacting you today, but what will it be like in 6 months down the line? Because a lot of times what we think is really critical today, when we think about it 6 months down the line, it'll not even be an issue.
Yeah.
So always step back and look at the big picture. So that's the B. Now the L. L is for let it pass or let it go. One of the most difficult things for leaders to do. As leaders, we all have bias for action. We want to take action, and we are kind of awarded for taking action, right? To say, I've seen people put it as part of their strength. I have a bias for action. Great, it works. But what about things that are not in your control? Because there's going to be a lot of things that will not be in your control. I mean, look at the current example. What can you do, right? So you've got to let it go. Sometimes things that you can't control, you've got to let it go. So that's the L. The O. O is for opinions of people that matter to you and to whom you matter. It is not opinions of people on your Facebook page. I mean, it could matter to you, but it's not that. It's the opinions of people to whom you are something, and who are also concerned about you. Constantly checking in with those people. They could be your manager, they could be your colleagues, they could be your family, they could be your friends, but really checking in on that, right? Getting their opinions is very important, because they sometimes notice symptoms or things that you may not even notice. So that's why it's important. So that's the O. The C is for change. In life, all of us at any stage of our life, or at least any given point in time, have to change, have to accept change. So sometimes, whether it could mean changing your mindset, it could mean changing your behavior, it could mean changing your career, it could mean changing your role, it could mean changing your company. But change is sometimes just inevitable. So sometimes you have to bite the bullet and make that change. And the K is for kinship. It's for your network. It's for your board of advisors, the people who are your crisis manager, the people whom you call up when you've had a bad day at work or at home. These again could be your coaches, mentors, colleagues, friends, ex-bosses. But having those groups, a group of people who are literally on your speed dial, is very important, because those are the people whom you'll ask for help anytime that you get stuck. So those are my 5 clear action, and they are in a very easy to remember word called block. So turning the block from negative to positive and saying, those are the actions we take.
Thank you so much. It's very well explained, Ritu. So use the block to sail through the hurdles that you are coming across. And I'm sure with the strategies that you've just shared with us, it's going to be very, very helpful to all our listeners. At least now I can experience in my life, what were those phases in my life when I was not at my best? And if only I was aware of the term block, starting from when you spoke about looking at the big picture, to letting it go, letting it pass, to looking at the opinions coming from those people who really matter to me or to whom I matter, and bringing the necessary changes in my own life, and then looking for the kinship, as you mentioned, or the network as well. So thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you.
Yeah, it was lovely chatting. And I know we told long stories, but I love the conversation. So thanks for inviting me. And I hope our audience enjoyed this as much as we did while chatting. So thank you.
Looking forward to catch up with you again sometime soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gaurav.